Hey guys, just a reminder, my online course is Birth Story Academy, and you can enroll in it at birthstory.com. It's taught by me. You can be in your jammies. It's online. It's pre-recorded, and it has a ton of freebies and downloads. It's everything that you need to prepare for your hospital birth. So hope to see you in Birth Story Academy. Today's episode is jam-packed. We're talking home birth, we're talking hospital birth with a congenital heart defect, and then we are talking about better relationships after a baby with relationship coach Chelsea Skaggs. So there's a lot that we are packing into this 1 hour long episode, and this is for everyone, but it's really for people in the postpartum period that are struggling to return to self, to return to sex, to return to their relationships, and you're just looking for a little bit of inspiration and solidarity with other people that are on this journey and some practical tools and tips on how to connect with yourself, connect with your partner, connect with your friends, connect with your family and your children after baby and babies. Enjoy. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does the day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this Birth Story family. Hey, Chelsea Skaggs. Welcome to the Birth Story podcast.
Thanks, Heidi. It's fun to be here with you.
It is fun, and I really love talking about relationships and sex. Who doesn't?
Right. As we should.
Yes. And I love your company, Better Relationships After a Baby. You guys can find Chelsea at the website postpartumtogether.com. And today we are talking about relationships, sex after babies, sex after kids, these just the way life shifts after we become mothers. And we are going to dig in a little bit to Chelsea's birth stories and how this company came to be, what relationship coaching is. I'm just so excited for this amazing, amazing episode. But we have to laugh right now. Okay, you guys, I'm in North Carolina. Chelsea, where are you?
I'm in Ohio.
So what's the temperature outside right now?
Well, I sent my kids on the bus and it said feels like 4 degrees.
Okay, so really cold. And
it's
here
cold.
in Charlotte, it's 45 degrees. So we're recording, I don't know when y'all are listening to this, but we're recording this in December 2024. So right before the holidays. So I'm over here in a sweatsuit, dying. And Chelsea has the window open in 4 degrees because she says she's hot.
I'm telling you. Period hormones are no joke.
Seriously.
Yesterday I was freezing, right? And today I'm bring on the cool air.
And it doesn't make any sense. I think this is going to filter into relationships and somehow in a minute, but it doesn't make any sense. I was just telling Chelsea before we started recording, in perimenopause, I sleep every night in tank top and underwear and my fan on, and the house is at 66 degrees. And yet somehow I'm still hot. But the second I wake up in the morning, I'm in a sweatsuit. So what's the deal? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just
we totally flopped because I woke up with 2 child humans on my chest and arms as I usually do. That body heat really got me, but I was fine.
Chelsea, how old are your children?
6 and 8.
Okay. Oh, and so do you co-sleep?
I have been a avid co-sleeper for over 8 years now.
Okay. Oh my gosh. I love you. If people have been listening to the podcast a long time, they know this story because I've told it multiple times. So mine are 9 and 10. They got their asses kicked out at 8 and 7. Okay.
Okay.
So you're probably on the brink of maybe like getting them out of there. It all started with this heat problem.
Okay.
I will tell you.
Fair.
I was getting really hot and really uncomfortable. And, they're upside down and sideways and kicking me. But yes, we co-slept until they were 7 and 8 years old. And then they were going to stay with grandma and grandpa in Montana for like 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I set the standard. I was like, okay, you're going to sleep without mommy for 3 weeks. When you come home, you are not coming back to this bed.
Love it.
And they complained when they got home for like 24 hours, maybe 3 days. They came in at 2 a.m. and then we were done. And then they've never come in again. So I think co-sleeping's awesome. And it can end at any time when both you and this is me coaching you, when both you and the kids are ready. I think we were all three ready. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, our house is like set up our house is old. And so the upstairs, the heat and the coolness is a little odd. And we have one kid's bedroom upstairs. And he's always like, oh, but it's too hot or it's too cold. And that's what keeps getting us.
I think that might be happening in your office right now, which is why you have your window open with 4
It
degree
is.
airflow. Cheers to the 100-year-old houses, though. So
That's right.
I actually don't know how old your house is, but
It's getting there.
Yeah.
It's getting there. It's geriatric for sure.
Yes. I'm geriatric. Probably so are you. We don't know. By the time that we have kids and build companies, you're probably geriatric, you guys. All right. Well, let's dig in a little bit. But before we can get into like better relationships after baby and what you do as a coach, I think it's really important to talk about your own journey. So let's start with your own pregnancies and your births and how those have kind of informed and shaped who you are today.
Yeah. Well, let me go back, 9 years. My husband and I kind of got to the point, where we were like, we don't really, maybe we'll have kids, maybe not. We're not going to prevent it. And when we got to that point, we were about to go to Colorado for Thanksgiving and scope out houses. We were going to move to Colorado and, we were going to Colorado. So I took a pregnancy test just to be sure. And lo and behold, that is when I found out we were pregnant and we were not going to move to Colorado. We decided instead to move back home near family in Ohio, which is where we are now. But I had been really fortunate as a young 20s adult to actually live with a family. So I rented a basement little apartment in their home and was really part of their family. And during this time, the mom had a couple of pregnancies and had a birth during that time. And she had a home birth, which I had never been exposed to before. But I got to know some of her friends. I got to know her midwife. They had a blessing way, which was just like a whole new concept to me. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And so when I was pregnant for the first time, I was like, I am going to do this at home with this same midwife. And I did. We had a really lovely first home birth.
Were you still living in this basement?
No.
Okay.
We had moved since then.
Okay. Listen, my brain is like, oh my gosh. Then was this family like part of it? I'm seeing like this goddess woman like over your home birth tub or something.
That would have worked, probably. They were such lovely humans and part of our life.
But you had moved somewhere else with your husband and then
okay.
And then we're setting up this home birth experience in a private space. Okay.
Yeah. And I really loved going that way. I labored at home. I had the birth tub in my little living room, had control over the ambiance and the energy, and those things were really great and had an overall really positive experience. I will say that there is so much that I thought I knew as a mom choosing to do things this way that I still had to learn. There were challenges I didn't expect, which again will kind of get us to the relationship portion and some of the things that I work on. Then I got pregnant for the second time and was planning on going with the same midwife, same home birth story, and found out in utero that she had a congenital heart defect. And so because of that, we were transferred, our midwife, that's a hard line for her. We were transferred to maternal fetal and ended up birthing at a teaching hospital in Ohio, which it was just very different. It was very different to have so many people involved.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions for you here.
Okay.
So let's go back to your home birth for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember like what gestation you were when you went into labor?
I was like 40 and 4.
Oh, perfect.
Somewhere right between 40 and 41.
Okay. So like completely average. That's great. 41 and 1 is the average gestation. 40 and 4 is perfect. Tell me about how you knew you were in labor. So many people come to this podcast because they are like, I just want to learn, like, how would I know? What would it feel like? So and I think on our first ones, we can remember every sensation.
Yeah.
So kind of like, where were you? What were you doing? Like, kind of how did it start, the unfolding?
Yeah. Oh, I love that because I also was like a little insecure maybe about like, oh, I don't want to call my midwife too soon or, I don't want to go to the hospital too soon. But my mom and I were going on walks at this point, getting to that place and it was very hilly and I could not make it up the hill that I usually made it up. And I think that was the indicator. It was about 9 a.m. because it was early August when I had my son. So we went pretty early. 9 a.m. I told my husband, like, can you start tracking this? I'm just feeling a lot different. And I think it was just like the progression of it. This is happening more frequently. It's feeling more intense. And at that point, I think my midwife came around 9 p.m. probably, so about 12 hours later, and I ended up giving birth just before 7 a.m. the next day. But it was that like I couldn't make it up that hill that I had been able to make it up without just pausing and heaving and definitely feeling it and then watching the progression throughout the day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I need listeners to hear is, you guys, that was 22 hours later. So especially as a doula, like when I'm interviewing with clients and I tell them, I come to you when you're in active labor. You heard Chelsea just say she did the first 12 hours kind of like with her mom and with her partner and kind of like at home doing her own thing. It's a slow build until it's not. Then that power and that intensity gets turned on and you're like, where's the midwife? Where's the doula? Where's the team? Where are all the people?
Yeah.
And even when you get to that point, it's still often you have about 12 more hours left. So in your case, 10. So,
and I really remembered the distinct difference for me was like, it became nighttime and I could not sleep more than I feel like my husband's like, you'd fall asleep for like 30 seconds and then wake up with the cramping and the contractions. But that definitely felt different when I was like, I couldn't stay in one position. I really, really had to focus on my breathing. It kind of took over everything.
How did you prepare for an unmedicated home birth?
So we did Bradley method preparation together. And I think one thing that was really helpful for us is my midwife had an apprentice who kind of served as the doula during that time. And so they were a team that was really helpful part of that. But we would go actually to our midwife's house for all of our appointments. And that's where she had books and she had, like little video clips and things that we just did really alongside her. So it was a very integrated preparation experience.
Yeah, I definitely believe when we're low risk, like when our babies don't have congenital heart defects, the safest place that you can give birth is at home. The fastest place you can give birth, the least complicated place you can give birth is at home. But of course, things like congenital heart defects, I mean, that's a great place to give birth in a hospital. Things like that come up. So when you gave birth to your first, were you standing up on the toilet, on the bed? I just have to visualize it. In the birth tub, where were you?
I love it. I did a lot of my laboring overnight on the side of my bed, like elbows up on the bed, my head resting on the bed, my back and my legs hanging down to the floor. And then once it really progressed, we did have a birthing tub in our living room. And so I think starting at like 3 a.m. probably, I got into the birth tub and ended up birthing at about 6:37. So I gave birth on my knees on the side of the birth tub into the water.
I love it. Do you have a video or pictures?
I do have some.
Okay. Well, any that you want to share with us, we would love
Okay.
to.
I love them too.
We would love to share them.
Also did not like I love my team so much that I didn't even know until like 2 years later that I had just shit in the tub too. Like they didn't even let me know. They scooped it out. They got it away. It was like 2 years later when my husband was like, "Oh, you didn't know?" They like had a little net and just got it out of there. So blessed.
They're so lovely. Midwives and their apprentices. Okay, I just needed to visualize as a doula. I need to like complete the birth sometimes and visualize. So you were in the tub. It is very important, you guys, if you're planning a home birth, don't get in the tub too early. That can actually kind of slow things down. It's important, like Chelsea was like upright, leaning forward, still going on walks, trying to nap for 30 seconds in between. It is possible though, isn't it? You fall asleep for 30 seconds. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh. It's wild.
Yes. All right. Now, I have covered heart defects on the podcast several times. I have a loop recorder in my chest. I have a congenital arrhythmia that I live with. And so I was very nervous about heart defects when I was pregnant. Neither of my children have inherited my arrhythmia, which is amazing. But I want to know what it was like to go to an appointment. Like, so is this just a routine anatomy scan? Like, how did this go down?
Our midwife sent us in for a routine anatomy scan, and we found during that time that she had a heart defect, and it blew our minds, right? Like we did not have experience with that. And it was an immediate transfer of care and just like all the expectations we had in our heads.
Okay. What's the name of the defect?
Her defect is tetralogy of Fallot.
Okay, I've never heard of that
DOF.
one.
Okay, so it's like a 4-part defect, which is the tetralogy.
Okay.
And it is, she had a hole that basic terms is like the blue blood and the red blood mix, and there's a lot of regurgitation of the blood, so the muscles can thicken and take away the function of the heart. So she did have to have an open heart surgery at 5 months, but we obviously were high risk during our birth experience.
Wow. I was assuming this was going to be immediately following the birth open heart surgery. So 5 months.
Yeah. So that was an interesting part is we knew that was likely, but they weren't going to be sure, right? Like they needed to see how her blood was flowing out of utero and decide could we wait until she grew a little bit bigger in order to do that surgery. When she was born, though, we did not know, but she also was born with a cleft palate. So her soft palate was not developed. And so it was, she did transfer to the NICU for that specifically because we didn't know for 2 days she didn't eat. And it wasn't until a nurse discovered as she was screaming, crying, that her palate wasn't closed. And so she wasn't able to latch to breastfeed. She wasn't able to use the bottles in the NICU because of she didn't have sucking motion. And because of her open palate.
And you weren't able to see something obvious with the lips.
No, her lips are totally fine. So it's in the very back roof of her mouth.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it isn't something that we see right away or is even checked right away. Now, typically when the lactation consultant or the nurse comes in, that is something that they are looking for. Okay, so Chelsea, she's in the NICU, but for how long and how is she then being fed so that she can grow to get to this surgery?
Yep. So she was in the NICU for 7 days. So we didn't have a super long NICU stay. And at first they were feeding her through her nose. And then eventually we tried a few different bottles until we found the specialty feeder that she could drink from. And once she was able to gain weight for a couple of days, we were able to take her back home.
Okay. And you said that that brand was Dr. Brown's, right? That actually
Hmm.
made the specialty bottle feeder. That's
Yes.
really important because there are going to be, I'm like, tuck that away, you guys. Like, tuck it away
Hmm.
just in case you have a baby with a cleft palate. There are options out there.
Yes.
So,
Yep. Yep. And it has like these little parts that, as anybody who's washed bottles and pumps and things knows, washing bottles is its own chore, but these ones are special because they come with like this special tiny little disc and this little cover that makes it so they don't have to actually suck it out, but it kind of fills the nipple itself for them to get it.
very
It's
cool.
wild.
I love that people take the time to create products for
Yeah.
those in need.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
I think it's wonderful. Okay, so you have this like very routine home birth, probably pretty enjoyable and ecstatic.
Mhm.
Then you find out that you have a child with a uniqueness. I hate the word defect, maybe like an
Yeah.
anomaly. We need to change the some of the terms, but like an anomaly and a uniqueness
Mhm.
about the heart. And I'm just wondering, like, because I know this leads into relationships, but I'm just like wondering, like, do both parents process this the same? Did you
Mm.
and your partner process this differently? I'm just trying to think, like, does this connect you or disconnect you, or does it
Mhm.
have the ability to do both?
Mhm. Yeah, I would definitely say it's a both and.
Mm-hmm.
The day we came home from that anatomy scan
Mm-hmm.
was one of the darkest and best days of my life. And I say that because it was so dark because in the moment, sometimes they do these scans and they don't give you much information. We ended up knowing that there was going to be a very viable solution for her out of
Mm-hmm.
utero. But that night and for the next few days, we didn't. The doctors in maternal fetal sometimes prepare you for this could be a big decision you have to make, or this could, there's a very wide spectrum of what this could mean. And we went home, I think like we sent our toddler with grandparents and we just probably stayed in bed and cried for a whole day. Like it just felt so scary and so big. And it, obviously crushed a lot of the vision we had for this next season of our family. And also, it opened up a level of vulnerability in our relationship with one another and in our relationship with our people. I have traditionally been the strong one that supports everyone else and keeps everyone else's spirits high, and I love to do that part, and it really opened us up to receive love and care through a time of uncertainty. So it was really a pivotal time, I think, for the level of vulnerability and trust in our relationship and in our kind of choosing relationships with people that would be with us on a harder road than we anticipated.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to come right back to that, but I want you to finish your birth story for me. And then I
Yeah.
want to come back to this relationship component and how we
Yeah.
how we move forward and how we move
Yeah.
through things together and as individuals. And so, was this going to then be an induction of labor, or did they want you to go into spontaneous labor? Or did they want you to have a C-section? What did this
Mhm.
look like from a care perspective?
I am pretty stubborn in that when you ask that question, I don't know what they wanted from me. I kind of went in saying, this is what I want. As long as none of these are a super high risk or there's nothing I'm missing, this is the direction I want to go. So
I love you,
there,
Chelsea. I love Chelsea. I love Chelsea Skaggs. You're amazing. Go empower, go keep empowering women. You empowered
yeah.
woman yourself. Okay, so what was your plan?
My plan was spontaneous labor without medication, not necessarily because it didn't feel like I had to go that way, but it's like that's what I knew and I did it once and I didn't want to mess with anything in my body at that time. So I went the day I knew she was coming, right? And I just like that morning, I was dancing with my toddler. He would have been 2. We were dancing in the living room and I just felt it. It was an instant. I knew, okay, it's time. I called my dad. I'm like, hey, I need you to come be with the toddler. I think we're going to be headed to the hospital today. Luckily, my husband was working from home, so we had that flexibility. And the hospital where I birthed does work with a midwife group. So I was able to be in touch with them. They knew I didn't want to be in that hospital longer than I had to. I wasn't going to come labor there all day, and there was a role for when I'm in the hospital and there's a role for being at home knowing my body. So we ended up finally going in probably about 4 o'clock. And I went into triage, and I remember the midwife on duty was like, I know you don't want to be here very long. I think you have some time. You can stay. Obviously, like most people would just stay right now, but if you want to go, you can go and come back. And so we drove probably 10 minutes, and I was in the van and I was like, oh, honey, like you've got to turn back. I don't think we can make it back home. So we turned back. This was probably about 5 o'clock, and I ended up birthing her at 8 o'clock. So
Wow.
that
So
was
your water must have been intact because they would have never let you go if your water was broken.
Yes.
Yeah.
My water broke very close to when I actually birthed her.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
second babies are funny because, the active labor is typically much faster, 6 to 10 centimeters to pushing to baby. So that's your active labor. So when you went in, did you have a vaginal exam done or were
I didn't. I think I was at like 3 or 4.
Yeah, you were probably 3 or 4 because when we're 3 or 4, we're like, oh man, this is getting intense. And with second babies, they can come faster. And you had this I'm jumping in your head right now, but I'm like, and you were like, well, we have to be in the hospital for this birth. Like we can't
Right.
accidentally give birth at home or on the side of the road. Well, I mean, you could, but trying to avoid that. So I think going in was the smart thing to do, but things can turn a corner so quickly. If your water breaks, game over.
Yeah.
Game over on a second baby. And just active labor can pick up as soon as the sun starts to go down. So I don't know what time, when the sun was setting, what time of year this was, but I know as we get into that early evening, things tend to ramp up. So it makes total sense to me that you were back at the hospital by 5, 6 p.m. and then gave birth at 8. So.
Yep. And with her, I also they did not allow me to have the water tub at the hospital. Some people do at this hospital, but because I had constant monitoring with her heart defect. So I knew as soon as I kind of checked myself in, I was going to be constantly monitored, but I did really talk to them about the minimal monitoring so that I could move as much as possible, which was really nice. Now that I think about it, I also birthed her on I was on my hands and knees on the birth bed, and I probably didn't lay down much at all.
And you guys, this is how physiological birth unfolds, right? So many people say, hey, Heidi, I just don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, your body is your teacher. No one probably said, get on your hands and knees and lean forward. It's what your body intuitively wanted to do. And the people around you are there to just support what your internal divine wisdom is telling you to do anyway.
Yep.
When I have doula clients who utilize pain management options like an epidural, that's where I channel people like you, Chelsea, and all my experiences giving birth myself unmedicated and giving birth with others unmedicated. And I utilize what I've witnessed and stories that have been told. And then I take their epiduralized body and I put them into those positions. And guess what?
Yeah.
It works better too. So thank you for sharing your story because it also helps those that are listening and those that come after you to trust their bodies. Trust their bodies. I can't say that enough. Even when there is a uniqueness about or fragility even to the baby that you're giving birth to. So I think it's important. So 2 babies, you had a 2-year-old at home, you come home, your baby has to have open heart surgery. I can't even imagine. Has to be bottle fed. Were you able to pump breast milk? Okay.
Yep. I lived with that pump stuck to me. I became, and this is something I actually love talking about, I became good at multitask pumping. I realized I wanted to pump, but I could not sit plugged into the wall all of the time. So I became very good at balancing those things while I was cooking and cleaning. And maybe I shouldn't encourage this, but driving, I mean, I just learned how to get it done.
Oh, girl. Okay. So when I gave birth to my first, Max, 10 years ago, I've been a doula for 21 years, but at the time I've always had other jobs and I mostly did pharmaceutical sales and medical device sales and consulting. So I shouldn't have been speeding, but I was really wanting to get home to Max.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I pumped in the car because I was an outside sales rep. So I had this little apron I would wear. I'd put my pump on, I'd put the apron on, and I would go. And I get pulled over in this rural town. I mean, rural North Carolina town. I don't even know what the name of it was because it's one exit off of the interstate or whatever. And I'm probably going 10 miles over the speed limit just trying to get home. And the police officer walks up to the side of the car and the pump is "Rrrt, rrrt, rrrt." And I was I had a baby 6 weeks ago and I'm pumping. And he was he literally put his hand up like this to not look at me or whatever. And he's "I'm so sorry. Could you just drive a little bit slower?"
Okay, bye.
I was okay, bye. And then he walked away and I drove away. So yeah, pumping was pumping in the car was one of my keys to success because on the way to work and on the way home from work, I was boom, boom, I can get 2 out of the way.
Yes.
So, and not take time away from my family or take time away from me. So yeah, I'm all about efficient pumping.
Oh my gosh. And if
I'm
I could
keeping it
plug really quickly, I miss my Honda Odyssey a lot because I sold it, but it had this little cooler area in it.
built into the car.
Yes.
Did not
And
know
a lot,
that.
there's this whole chunk of years that Honda Odysseys have these little cooler boxes inside of them. And so it was absolutely perfect.
I'm quite certain a pumping mom invented that. It was not for
definitely.
Coca-Cola. That is for sure. So we're keeping all of this in because I am really about efficient and multitasking with your pumping because otherwise it can be really depressing.
Oh, yeah.
And it takes a long time too.
It does.
It really does. Okay. So I want to now jump back to your business and relationship coaching because, Chelsea and I talked a little bit before this podcast episode, you guys, because, my marriage didn't make it. I was divorced by the time my children were 3 and 4 years old. And, I don't want that for anyone. I want everyone to be with their best friend and their partner and the person that they've chosen to have kids with and to figure out your relationship for the long run. And so that's why that's essentially why we're talking today is to hear Chelsea's stories, but to also hear about the impact that she's making in the world in relationship coaching and how you literally can hire her to work with you and go through the Better Relationships After Baby coaching program. So let's dig in. What changed for you? What was your job? What were you doing before this?
Yeah. Before I got pregnant, I was a teacher and I was living in a whole different state. We moved for work. And so I was teaching. And then we decided when we got pregnant that wasn't the community where we wanted to start a family. And we moved closer to family. And that is when I kind of learned about online business. And so I started dabbling in a brand and figuring out a little bit about wellness coaching. And that was my first introduction, was thinking about foods and nutrition and body movement and all of those things. And that was a nice little way to stay connected to myself as a new mom, to have something to be putting my energy and my brain space into, but also gave me a lot of flexibility. And as I was going through that, I kept meeting moms. I kept meeting a lot of recent moms and, a couple years out, and I got to know them and I got to know their stories. And what really lit up for me was that honestly, there were a lot of people talking about nutrition and exercise and just overall body wellness. And there were people talking about mental health, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, these things after baby. But it just felt like there was such a huge gap in the identity of someone, the friendships, the way that we see ourselves in the world, and the relationship. And so I really, before I even started my business, I just started holding like peer groups with new moms. And I created a 12-week curriculum for them and went through, addressing your friendships after baby, your sex life after baby, your like how you literally see yourself in the world after baby. Just these things that I thought were such a gap for me. And I started to see that in the other new moms in my life. So that is kind of just where I started. And then it was well received and people encouraged me to keep going. I have a psychology background and an education background. And so then once I pursued life coaching, that kind of felt like a good culmination to work with people. I did like one-on-one with moms specifically. And what I realized in that was that their relationship with their spouse literally touched everything going on in their life, and everything going on in their life touched their relationship with their spouse. And so for me, it was this reckoning with like, what is the one piece of the puzzle I want to play in the world to try to make the world a better place? And it is helping the relationship of parents through those big life transitions.
Yeah, it is so hard. I run a postpartum support group every 2 weeks for my own private doula clients and my doula clients that are in Birth Story Boutique. That's a small, well, it's not small. It's my company here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that I have about 12 doulas on my team. So anybody who's a member of Birth Story Boutique, even if I'm not their private doula, if their private doula is someone on my team, they come to these postpartum meetups that are twice a month. And I will say we tackle so many of these questions, but I don't coach them, right? I'm just there as a listener and to facilitate the engagement of moms talking to moms, right? Yeah. And I'm like, hey, I'm your doula, essentially, or part of the role of your postpartum period. And the conversations are always the same, right? Like when I say, has anyone returned to sex? It is shocking to me. Like the answer is no for long. Like there's no like 6 weeks, one day. This is like most of the people I work with are not returning to sex for months, if not more than a year. Like often if there's milk coming out of their breasts, they don't want them touched. If they're still breastfeeding, they just don't want to be touched. They want to, you were talking about health and nutrition. I hear them say over and over again, like they just don't even like seeing themselves naked in the mirror. And so, of course, they're insecure about being naked in front of their partner who loves them and who they love. But there's these huge mental hurdles. And we're recording on Thursday. No, right? Is today Thursday? Yeah, we're recording on Thursday. So my group that I had this week on Tuesday, one of the women said that she just didn't feel interesting anymore. She just felt like, who am I? What's my personality? What do I like? Because my whole world is taking care of little kids. And that one just kind of broke me. And so I know that there's people listening right now that are like probably crying. They feel all of these things. I felt them. And like I said, my marriage ended. So there's such a huge opportunity to return to self and return to their relationship. But we need strategies. We need help. So talk to me about like what your program like does. Like how, like, I don't want you to give away your program for free, of course, but like just some pearls of like hope for people listening.
Yeah. I think there's really two big aspects here, and you've hit on them. One is return to self, but also like return to changed self. And I don't know if you use the term matrescence very often. I love the term matrescence. I love how it mirrors the term adolescence. And I think we need to give ourselves a lot of space for how our priorities, our values, the way we see the world, the way we see ourselves in the world, like all of this can shift a lot through pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and beyond. And I think there's a lot of room for discovering what those changes are in yourself, your partner, discovering what those changes are in them, and then having really intentional conversations about kind of getting to know each other again. You are two changed people. And this is not just through birth. I think that this happens anytime there's a really huge transition. It could be loss of a parent. It could be, a huge move, but these big transitions kind of shake our identities up. And I think we're kind of trained to think like, well, we've been with our partner, we know them, we just keep operating this certain way. And the way I like to phrase it is, our phones they update their operating system, and then things are a little bit different. And I teach my clients to look at that in themselves and their partners. What is this new operation system update? What does that mean? And how do we learn how we work together again with some of those changes? So a lot of that is, what are our priorities? What are our values? Where do those overlap so that we really want to make this the foundation of our family versus maybe we have a couple different priorities where we need to make sure, you have a friend bucket for this priority and you have a friend bucket for this priority because you are still two unique individuals. So it's a lot of getting to know, it's a lot of curiosity about yourself and about your partner, which one of the biggest things I do is help my clients. I really nerd out over arguments. I consider myself for my clients to be like the detective, the investigator of their argument cycles and communication patterns. And when we can figure out when our interactions go from productive and on the same team to reactive and harmful, that's where I really step in and help people make a shift, help them to not go over that bridge, but to stay more purposeful and productive in their communication. So there's definitely the personal aspect of we've changed as people and we get to know each other again. And I help my clients do that through some different like fun personality things. We look at our values, what they want out of life, why they even decided to bring children into this chaotic world, like what are they doing as individuals and together, and then really how they interact as a team. And I really inject small changes usually into those communication patterns so that they can do that a little more respectfully. And I find that when we get rid of a lot of those jabs or those long held resentments that come up in an argument or that thing you keep coming back to, then we have a lot less hurt and a lot less of those cycles.
Wow. And I know this is a podcast, but you guys, like Chelsea just like lit up. Like she is on fire for helping people. It's really unbelievable just to see your facial expressions and how like passionate you are about this. Just some logistical questions though, like do you work with individuals? Like do you work with like, okay, let's, for purposes of this segment, I'll say male, female, right? Like, okay, many people are on this podcast in all different relationship types, but like, let's just say for this example, it's a husband and a wife. Do you do one-on-one coaching with the husband, one-on-one coaching with the wife, and then coaching together? Like, what does that look like? Okay.
Yes, that is, I really feel like is like the sweet spot of this model. So I am typically working with people over the course of 4 months. That is my coaching container. And that might be pre-baby, post-baby. I've had clients 5-10 years after having kids that are just, trying to get back on the same page and really get back into alignment. But the way I do this is I have 4 themes. So we deal with resentment. We have a whole week on, just resentment and personal goals. We have a whole segment on personality and communication styles. We have a whole segment on like just the home logistics, management, all of that. And then we have a segment on what needs to be true for their relationship to keep going forward. And what I do is I rotate. So I meet with partner A 1 week, partner B the next week. And then I do the dirty work of like compiling all their notes and looking at what they've said and what their priorities are. And I guide them on a conversation every 3 weeks, bringing their things together, looking for the main themes. And one of my favorite things is when I'm like, you said it this way and you said it this way, but you're actually like working towards the same thing. Let's figure out how to make language that you both work towards. Or, this is when you get frustrated and this is when you get frustrated. So if we both make a little tweak, we can move towards each other in that part of the cycle. So I find it really helpful, especially for the males in this situation, for them to have their own space. I love the men I work with. And I will tell, my female clients, like, I love your husbands. I have yet to have a shitty partner really to show up in this space.
But if a partner is willing, if they're the type
Yes.
of partner that's willing
Yes.
to do relationship coaching, that already
Yes.
says so much about that
Yes,
person.
totally.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But I find that they really do thrive on being able to say some of the hard things that they're not going to say at the coffee pot at work, or they're not going to say to their mom. It gives them both a place to process out their thoughts and then have some support in how they bring that to one another.
Wow. Where were you, Chelsea, after so mine are 1 year apart. So I had a fertility journey, had a baby, instantly pregnant again. Then all of a sudden I had like 2 babies laying there. And, I am your exact target audience, right? Like, my husband at the time and I were just like passing ships in the wind. You know what I mean? It was just like survival mode. We were not focused on our individual selves. We were not focused on each other. We were fully focused on making sure these 2 humans stayed alive. And one of mine had cerebral palsy. So similar to your story, like raising a child that had extra needs, I would say. And, and then ultimately the unraveling of a marriage, which is so sad. So this is something I'm really passionate about, because all of my doula clients too, like I get to see everybody in their highlight moments. Like they're so in love. The oxytocin is flowing. It's like they're turning into parenthood. It's so, everything's glowy and magical and just so fun. And then I check in with them 2 weeks and 6 weeks and 12 weeks and 16 weeks and 20 weeks. And sometimes I just see the high just sort of get into this hard, dark. And I think now just find Chelsea and she'll help you through it.
Yeah.
Now that I know about you. So
I think what I tell my clients is that I'm not going to say that every marriage is going to work in the long run. There are a number of reasons, right, why maybe a marriage should not or isn't going to work. However, I think there's a reason why so much divorce and separation happens when there are young kids in the home. There's a lot of shit going on, and my goal is to help people use less of their energy on things like resentment or that same argument over and over again, or feeling lonely because they're not sure how to connect with their partner. A lot of energy goes into those things. And if we can alleviate that and free some of that up for personal connection and relational connection, I think that is really helpful. And I always say to my clients, even if down the road they decide that they would be better going separate routes, the ability to communicate and be on the same team and know how to have respectful conversations and productive conversations is something that we need no matter what when we are parenting alongside another human who has a different brain, a different lived experience. The world is so interesting in that our brain is not the same as anyone's, even the partner that we marry.
Yes. And I will say, as a divorced person, you still have to communicate with that person 17 times a day, right? Somebody's left a shoe, a water bottle, homework assignment, who's buying this birthday present for that party. I mean, you can go your separate ways in a divorce, but if you are truly co-parenting, there is so much communication that has to be done. A huge factor of this, though, Chelsea, is sex.
Mhm.
And people don't, I think there's so many people that don't want to believe that or don't want to talk about it. And I'm like, there was a very special person in my life who got divorced after 26 years, after the third child went to
Mhm.
college. And people said, to me, do you think that there was any warning signs or this or that?
Mm.
And, who am I to inject myself into someone else's marriage, right? But the red flag that I saw for a long time was a consistent conversation with this person about not having sex with their husband.
Yeah.
And so maybe they got divorced for 1,000 other reasons, right? But
Mm.
I think like that doesn't seem like a good recipe. Lack of
Yeah.
intimacy or
Yeah.
lack of sex. But it's so hard. Cesarean scars, our perineum tears, milk is leaking out of our boobs, right? Like, can you just share a few things or hope for is it possible to return to love and intimacy and good sex in a relationship or a marriage after babies and kids?
Yes. And I think it all starts with communication. I think it starts with the boring stuff that makes way for the spicier stuff to happen. I think that resentment is the number one buzzkill for sex and intimacy in relationships. And so, that is always where I start. But also, I think that most of us have pre-baby sex that's just kind of spontaneous and fun and it just feels good. And then it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't happen with the same spontaneity. Like the factors leading up to it really change, and that can make it hard to get back into something. I think this metaphor will make sense, but I ran a half marathon in October, and now I'm looking outside and I'm like, I don't want to lose all of that, but like it's cold out there. There is snow on the ground. I do not want to get back out there. But if I don't for long enough, it's going to be really, really hard for me to get back to it. So I need to figure out, what kind of gear do I need? What is going to make me willing to show up outside to keep running? And I think that the same is true for sex. So I talk usually with my females, but I will say sometimes it is the men who lose the libido and sex drive more than their partners. So I don't want to, overgeneralize, but I like to really work with people on what their turn on needs are. And that's not just foreplay. It's like, maybe I know every Wednesday I'm going to get to take a hot bath and my boobs and vagina are going to be clean and I'm going to feel a little bit more human, and that's going to make me more likely to want to connect. Or maybe it's I'm staying at home with the kids all day. I need my partner. Again, I usually start my clients with like, pick a day to try to make it work. Maybe, again, on Wednesdays, maybe my partner's going to come home and take the baby for an hour, and I'm going to sit in my chair and read like a spicy book or listen to a spicy podcast or something that reminds me that I am also a sexual being. I can feel good in my body. My brain can get there. If we talk about our bodies, they're different. They feel different. They look different. It can be awkward, which is again where I think communication is important. It's important to be able to say something like, honey, I'm not feeling super comfortable in my skin right now, and I still want to have a meaningful connection with you, but this is a little awkward for me, or I'm not quite sure how to do this. I think we need some more vulnerability in that, but also getting out of your head and allowing yourself to relax a little bit. That's the hardest thing for my female clients is you've got a to-do list. You've been needed all damn day. Like, letting the brain go so that you can show up in a real intimate connection is the thing. And so we've got to figure out, how do I at least start preparing myself to show up in a way that could be a possibility? I used to enjoy the fucking steam from the mac and cheese. I'm draining the mac and cheese and I'm like, okay, I'm getting a facial. And then I'm putting away the dishes and I'm like listening to some salsa music because I need to just feel good in my body. But I don't think it just happens. I think we have to figure out what is prohibiting me from getting into this place and what can I do and what can I ask my partner to do to support me so that this can feel like a part of myself again.
Mm-hmm. And as you're talking, Chelsea, I'm just like, oh my gosh. And these conversations have to be so customized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, the one person may want all of these things and then they're taking a medication, let's say, that like drives things down. Or like this other person is, maybe not as sexual as their partner is, or, there's so many different dynamics, or like one, like you said, resentment, communication, and vulnerability. I think you said 50 times on this. Those are buzzwords.
Those are my words.
Yeah, I was like, for this podcast, for sure. So I just love what you're doing. I mean, Chelsea, you were born to do this. I mean, very rarely on this podcast do I cross paths with someone where I think like they are in their element. They are doing the exact thing that they were born to do. I really think that you have found your calling, from psychology to teaching to parenting, and now into this role with relationship coaching, and really just rocking this company, Better Relationships After Baby. So I'm just really excited. I want to refer a ton of people to you. What's the best way for Birth Story podcast listeners to get a hold of you, to talk to you, to have a consult with you, to think about hiring you?
Yeah. Well, I always love if people are podcast listeners, I do have a podcast called Better Relationships After Baby, which is a great way to just figure out, like, does my style match with what you want? I think that's really important. But then I started a blog with my birth stories. It started with my birth stories almost 5 years ago. And I've just kept that URL. So it's postpartumtogether.com. And the blog has evolved from, your first pee after birth and your first poop after birth were things I used to write about frequently. And now it's a lot more relationship heavy. But on that page, there is a services, how to work with me, the ways that I offer that. So I have a consult link on there. You can just click it. You can get straight on my calendar. Those are very like easy breezy kind of meet and greet. So, I always tell people, I will tell you if I can help you, if I really believe I can help you. And if in the off chance I can't, I probably know someone who can. And so if you are having a situation that you could use support with, like, let's talk. I would love to help you, or I would love to find the person that is going to best support you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chelsea, for being here. Like I said, I really wish I had found you earlier in my life, but I'm so thankful that our paths actually crossed doing the same circuit in different cities for Babies and Bumps.
Yes.
So let's give a little shout out to Babies and Bumps, because it's it's an expo for parents. So you guys should definitely be following Babies and Bumps and seeing if they're coming to a city near you. But they bring in expert speakers to do talks at this parenting conference. And Chelsea has done her circuit in her cities, and I've done my circuit in my cities. And it's really fun being part of Babies and Bumps. So everything is linked in the show notes. So we make it really easy for you guys. If you want to get a hold of Chelsea, just click and scroll down to the show notes. Everything's linkable. You can easily get a hold of her. But I appreciate your communication and your vulnerability today and sharing your stories.
Oh, well, it's an honor. As you can tell, I could talk about this stuff for days on end.
Well, you guys can talk to Chelsea for days on end. Just go over to that postpartumtogether.com or look up Better Relationships After Baby. And again, it's Chelsea Skaggs. And again, everything's linked in the show notes. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan, and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like.